Good morning. I'm Jim Campanini, editor of The Sun, and Dennis Galvin of Westford is here with us today. He's running as a Republican for the 2nd Middlesex District's House seat that is now held by the incumbent Democrat Jim Asiero. We have a third candidate in this race, Eileen Martino, and she'll be here with us later today. But Dennis, I want to welcome you here and ask you some of the, give us a little background. Give the people a little, your background, what you did for a career, and then maybe we can talk about why you are running for
Sure,
the seat.
I'd be glad to. First of all, thank you for having me, and both you and Dave. I appreciate the opportunity to come up here and share my views with you. Well, I mean, I'm originally, I had a 30-year career in Massachusetts State Police. Began as a trooper, retired as a major. Worked as investigator for many years. Ended as a senior manager. I did a 3-year stint as the first director of security for the Executive Office of Transportation. I had a chance to learn about Homeland Security and transportation finance issues there, and then I went into the private sector. Spent the last 4 years working for a global security provider, and got my private sector teeth kind of sharpened a little bit. Helping to, I did manage the security force up at the nuclear power plant up in Seabrook, and I've also served on the planning board in Westford now for the last 9 years, which has been a very interesting and rewarding experience. I have a lovely wife. Been married to my lovely wife Kathy for 37 years. Wow. And I've got 4 children I'm very proud of, and I have 2 lovely little granddaughters. And it's one of the reasons why I'm doing this is I want to kind of make this a better place for them, and I think I have some talent, some knowledge to be able to come and bring to the table and try to make that happen.
Good. You've certainly got a great background. You've seen it from government from I think all sides.
Yeah.
And but what are some of the reasons that you decide to take the plunge right now? Is there any particular issue or issues that concern you, both statewide and locally?
Well, yeah, I think there are essentially 3 issues. First of all, I think that the Massachusetts economy, while it is holding its own to some extent, can be expanded. I think we have to expand economic opportunity across Massachusetts. I think we have to get rid of the waste and fraud in state government so that we can reduce the taxes and reduce cost burdens to attract industries to locate and build in Massachusetts. I know that our unemployment rates have been relatively have improved over the last few months, but as your paper has pointed out several times, that's not the whole picture. There's an issue with labor participation rates. There's a lot of issues with people giving up. There's major issues about the old industrial cities in Massachusetts and the unemployment rates there. And there are also issues, and I have picked this up on my campaign trail, with folks 25 and under, looking and worried and concerned about a future here in Massachusetts. So trying to see if we can't do something about that is very important. The second issue that I think is important is making sure that that we review and look at this our whole process for revenue sharing, which we call local aid. I want to look at we're at the point now where because there's a lot of financial stress across the board, you know, there's always the option the towns have of raising property taxes, but that's sort of I'd like to see that as a last resort. I want to see if there's a better way of improving the sharing process for revenue to allow some of the towns to keep some of the revenue that they have, so that they can function and perform, maintain their quality of their schools and their public safety services without having to really destabilize their property tax situation. And
so just be looking at formulas that are now set by the
formulas,
state.
Long-term policies on economic redevelopment has a lot to do with that, because for example, there are about 10 or 15 cities in Massachusetts, my own hometown of Brockton being one of them, where the state is basically funding almost 50% of the operating budgets. And now I understand that those cities have significant issues and that they need assistance. But the question that I'm raising long term is this the new normal? Is this the way it's always going to be? Or are we going to have a very concentrated effort to try to see if we can reverse the economic situations in those areas? I think the status quo, I think the leadership on Beacon Hill has gotten very comfortable with the way things are, with the exchange of the support, And I don't think they have the incentive or the impetus, if you will, to really try to change that and make that come about. So that's the other thing.
Now, you guys are, I'm sorry, Westford and Chelmsford would be a giving towns, I would imagine.
Well, that's a very good way to put it. Yeah, that was your quote, not mine. So, so that was a good way to put it. And you know, I think we need to as folks that are contributing significant amounts. I mean, for example, Westford, I think, contributes about $63 million worth of income tax each year. I think we have the right to ask and to say, okay, what is the long-term plan here? What are we going to do? I mean, we're willing to support and do what we have to do to make sure that that everybody in Massachusetts succeeds. But we don't want this to be an open-ended proposition where it's just take, take, take. We want to be able to see some progress going in the other direction. And you know, one could make the argument, I'm not making it, but one could make the argument that the substantial amount of money that's gone to the cities has not really done much. Its MCAS rates are still poor, drug addiction rates are still high, crime rates are high, unemployment is still out of sight. So what is happening with that money and how is it being used? That's a big issue that I'd like to tackle and see if we can address.
So you're telling me that 8 years ago, when Governor Deval Patrick promised to lower property taxes, that hasn't happened in Westford or Littleton, which is another part of your district?
I will concur with that statement. How's that?
Have they gone up a lot?
No, I have to say the towns have tried to keep the property taxes stable. I think, but as you've reported, you can see the tension in Chelmsford, right? They just had an issue where they're going to cut their budget. You can see the issue in Westford over the last few years. Our teachers, our police, our fire people have had unrest. I mean, not unrest, but they've been unsatisfied with the offers that have been given to them, which have been, you know, a couple of years without anything, and then maybe a 1% and a 2% hit at the end. I think one of the things that caused me to really focus on the issue was as I was researching this, and bearing in mind the amount of state money that comes up to Lowell and Lawrence and Haverhill. During 2012, all of our teachers, prep teachers, the fire and police, had issues with their salaries. They were not satisfied with them. They were looking at less than 2 to 3% increases in total, I think, for like for 3 years. They were asked to take buys on increases. At the same time, you know, Lowell Police Fire and teachers were getting, I think, 2% was a 6% raise. And I said, well, geez, this is kind of an interesting little dilemma. I says, oh, we want to retain some of our people. What can we do to try to see if we can't provide for that as well? That needs to be addressed down the line, and that's what I'd like to see if we can do. I think key to it is reviving the economies in these towns, in these cities, to get a tax base back here, which I don't think really, in some cases, some places, not much exists.
Well, a lot of the savings that were accrued, just about that little example, and I don't know what has happened in Westford, the unions, especially the teachers' unions, agreed to new health care plans.
That's
They
true.
used to have the Cadillac plan,
Yeah.
and where they helped to join the GIC, and those savings in the agreement that was made was that they would receive, you know, some of that money back, which was able to afford the pay raises. But going forward, you don't know if that's going to be.
Well, it's a
you know,
concern. Yeah, that's a concern.
So,
And they can feel the tension. I think the town feels the
Yeah,
tension.
I don't know if Westford has joined the GIC.
No, they have not, and I think
so,
they still stayed out of it.
Yeah, so we were just a story that came out of the State House yesterday shows that we're already lagging behind in our revenue
I
collections,
saw, yeah.
almost like $215 million. And when you look at it, 44% of the state budget is now going to healthcare
Yes.
costs. So
Yes.
that is a big expense. I mean, that used to be less than 20% only 4 or 5 years ago of the budget. Now it's doubled.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impacting all communities.
Well, and you know, that's another issue. I mean, healthcare. We've got to really examine the healthcare issue, how it's evolved and rolled out over the since 2006 reform. I think to address that issue, I would say, you know, I think there's been a dramatic shift in the emphasis in the program from the time that Governor Romney put it through to where it is right now. When it came out in 2006, it was essentially it offered catastrophic insurance. It tried as a general feature, and it tried to attract the private sector in to compete through the exchange with offerings to the folks to try to stimulate private sector growth and buying. What's happened since that time is that mandates have increased. We've seen a consolidation of healthcare providers in Massachusetts that is of concern. We've seen situations involving mandates, as far as like outpatient care being provided, the credible care standard being increased. This has had a tendency to sort of really create high premiums for businesses and at the same time shrink the market so that there's not a lot of competition. I think we have to go back into that, and we have to look at that and see if we can make this work, because you're absolutely right. This could, and I'll quote Senator Steve Panchatakis, who said, if we don't get this healthcare thing under control, we're not going to be able to do anything. I think he was absolutely right about that.
Yeah. Now, we can go back to this issue, because I want to bring that up. Local aid seems to be a big issue in this campaign.
Yes.
Okay, but you've mentioned 3 issues that while you're running. You've mentioned
There's
2
one
of
more.
them. Yes, mass economy, review of revenue sharing, and local aid. So what is the third?
Third one is the conduct of business, the way business is conducted on Beacon Hill. There's a serious issue, in my judgment, of trust and confidence with the Massachusetts legislature. We've seen the most blatant case has been the accusations that have swirled around the House leadership with regard to participation in the probation scandal. But if you go into the weeds, if you will, and look at some of the way that business is conducted, you can see there are some significant issues that need to be addressed. For example, bills only have 24 hours. They can't even get 24-hour bill time to look at bills. They get rammed through. The legislature has rejected consistently the imposition of a code of conduct which would make each individual member a mandated reporter for criminal and ethical violations. I've taken the pledge to do that regardless of whether the legislature provides that. I will do that and hold myself to that standard. There's an issue about the bipartisanship on the Ethics Commission. Right now I think the House Speaker is the only one that can initiate ethics investigations. There's an attempt to try to broaden that to a 20-member threshold that would allow that to happen, and I would support that. Posting committee votes online, extending the open meeting law, something that should have been done a long time, to the proceedings of the House, I think are all critical things that I would like to help bring about if I were to be elected to the legislature.
Okay. Let's go back to the local aid issue, okay, because this has played prominently in this race. All right, between what the incumbent says that he's increased the local aid number or at least the state has under his tenure to Westford and Littleton, and then you have taken exception to some of that.
Yes.
So, okay.
Yes.
So
Now,
explain the.
Sure. The local aid has increased, I think, in general about 2.5% over across the board. I'm not familiar with exactly how much money Westford is getting out of that share, but I mean I think it's a minimal amount. So it's a bare minimum. I know that the local aid budget for Chapter 70 has increased in this budget about $4.4 billion, which is a significant increase. But I'm going back over time, over the last 5 years, and I'm looking at a decrease in about 40% across the board. Now these are recent efforts to try to recover. I just don't know whether or not they're going to be sustained, and that's a major issue. And and I think I want to see a commitment that, like, for example, the incumbent voted to oppose or voted to support a limitation on the local aid budget debate in this last session of the legislature. As a legislator from the 2nd Middlesex District, you should never oppose a debate or put a limitation on local aid, because that issue is so critical for the district. It should always be open on the table for discussion and for amendment if necessary. And that's a big issue with me. That's probably the crux of where we're coming from. There has been a minimal increase in local aid. I acknowledge that, but I believe it has been less than as robust as it should be, And I'm not satisfied that there's a long-term commitment to make sure that that continues.
Wouldn't part of that local aid dearth be part of the economic problems we're just coming out of, the nation and the state?
Well, some of it was. There's no question about that. But that was 2006, 2007.
Well, 2008.
Right.
That was
But
the depth of it.
Right. But in the same time period that you're talking about, the state budget increased, since Governor Patrick's been in there, the state budget's increased $11 billion. Okay, some of that should have made its way back to the cities and towns, and that's a concern for me. And I would like to see we need a much more aggressive accountability for that, and that's what I'd like to offer.
Well, that period also coincides with the great explosion in healthcare costs.
Yes.
And I was somewhat amazed today to see this latest figures out of the State House, that only 6% of the state budget goes to education.
Yes.
44% is now going to healthcare. And I think the second most important thing was
Pensions?
No, the pensions wasn't on that list, but it was government services. So it was the government service department, 6% to education, which basically is for
Chapter
public
70,
school,
yeah.
public schools.
Well,
and
I
stuff.
think what's happened. This is my criticism of the House leadership, and in the last 8 years, there's been a focus on expanding state government, and it has come at the expense of small businesses, the municipalities, and the taxpayers. And what has it led to? It's led to, in my judgment, a parade of scandals and a culture of corruption on Beacon Hill. And I think we need to address that and try to change that. And the incumbent has basically supported the expansion. He's supported the tax and spending increases. He's provided local aid, as we've just discussed, but not to the levels and at the sustained rate that I'd like to see. I think he's remained silent in the face of widespread corruption. And if you look at his voting record, he votes 95% of the time with the House Speaker and consistently supports those rulings by the Speaker that limit debate and cut down on the openness of the legislative proceedings. And, in my judgment, that's not the direction that we want to be going.
How is you, as a minority representative in this Democratic dominated state house, what can you do about that?
Well, that's a good question. That's probably one of the most frequently asked questions I get. And I would say this. I would say that there has been I think a kind of a confused idea that somehow if you're in the leader or you're in the dominant party that you have access to benefits that people don't. Well, I think history is proving that not to be the case. I think what you've got now is a very strong, iron-handed leadership that has its own agenda and excludes its own members, and basically holds them, willing to hold them, with punitive action if they don't buy into it. And I would offer the experience with Representative Charles Murphy down in Burlington, who questioned the leadership of the House, and for lack of a better description, seems like he got drummed out of was ostracized and drummed out of the legislature as a representative. I think that the legislators now are afraid to run contrary to their leadership because they feel that there'll be ramifications. I won't have that problem. I'll be free of that. There's a base of 30 Republicans. Hopefully that'll expand to some extent. If we have a governor, that will even give us a stronger position to work from. And as I view the votes over the years from, not the years, but the last session, I notice that there are a lot of independent Democrats. And I'm not going to name them for putting them at risk, but there are some independent Democrats who I believe, if the numbers change somewhat, that they would be willing to oppose the leadership and take stronger action in a different direction. And I think that's what the hope of this election is all about. That's what we're trying to accomplish. The days of reformers like Michael Dukakis and the Democratic Party, as I see it right now in the legislature, are not there. Those folks have been drummed out. And right now, it's a lockstep party unity that's being imposed on the Hill, and I don't think that's good for the folks in my district, nor for the people of Massachusetts.
We can see over this last session that growing number of Republicans in the House has been able to do some
Yes.
make some changes.
Sure.
Okay, because now they are becoming a growing bloc, and yeah, even though they can't really sustain a veto or anything like that, but they are they are needed for some bipartisan efforts. At least and they could make a lot of noise now.
I would offer you two examples where they actually did do that. The first was the innovation tax.
Yes,
They were the
yeah.
first ones to raise that, and they captured the public concern and sentiment, and they were able to force a reversal. The other one, I think, has been in welfare reform. I believe that the Republican leadership and the Republican and certain rank and file members of the House, particularly Representative O'Connell, has led a very, very strong effort in trying to reform and change some of the bad practices that have been perpetuated in the Department of Transitional Assistance. And I think that just goes to show you with such a small number what they can do. If we can expand that number, I think that would even be more impact in the
So
legislature.
you're gonna work with the majority. We have a few reps around here of the Republican stripe that seem to say no more than anything else. I'm thinking, obviously, that's gonna be your first probably inclination when something comes down from the Democratic establishment. But how you have to work with that, or at least shape it, or get it to be a position where you can support maybe something that didn't begin that way.
Yeah, well, that's legislation. That's how it's done. And that's what we haven't seen here in Massachusetts for a while. What I'd like to do is, when something comes down, wherever it comes from, I'm gonna give it a good evaluation. I'm gonna evaluate it independently to find out whether I believe it's good for Massachusetts and whether it's good for the district. And at that point in time, and this is what I was trying to say, what we need now is leadership that although we vigorously press the needs and concerns of our district, is still flexible enough to step across party lines, step outside the status quo, and try to build new coalitions to try to address some of the problems that we face. And that's a very good example of what I would try to do. Absolutely, I would try to work with Representatives Golden or Nangle or anybody, Corey Atkins, if it comes down. I'd see what we have in common. I'm going to advocate for what I think we need to be able to do. And if it's something that is really it's going to not benefit the Commonwealth of the district, I would oppose it. But my inclination is to try to get things done. And I think I've given pretty good evidence of that on my time at the planning board and some of the initiatives I've done in Westford, the growth management bylaw. I've had to work with people to try to accomplish common objectives. I'm not afraid to do that. I think that's the essence of political life in a democracy, and that's what I'm going to try to see if we can't have happen. But I'm freer to do it than I think my incumbent is.
Now, you made a good point about that technology tax. We were against that from the very beginning, and it took a while, but the legislature realized that they made a mistake. And yet it seems now we have another ballot initiative on the gas tax, okay, which the legislature approved, but now this new gimmick tying everything to the consumer price index. That seems to be the flavor of the
Yes,
month
it
for the
is.
taxes. And it appears now, the latest polls I've seen, there's a slight movement that will be repealed if we had to vote today. It seems like a lot of Democrats who approved that initially have now abandoned that position. Okay, what are your thoughts on the gas tax? Okay, and I know this has come up as an issue because the incumbent says that I guess he was originally against the gas tax, but then he voted for it, as you say, because it was a part of the total budget package.
Yeah, I'll go through that with you.
Okay.
All right. I mean, as far as the record
But you're
is concerned,
opposed to the gas
I'm opposed
tax.
to indexing. It's
and-
fundamentally taxation without representation, and I would like to inform you that yesterday I was endorsed by Tank the Gas Tax Coalition. So they endorsed me yesterday, and they did it because of my position on the gas tax. With regard to the incumbent's record, as you're all aware, when the bill was in the House, he did oppose it. All right, he opposed the gas tax indexing. However, it was an interesting vote because there was a second, there was an addended vote to it that would have put a limit of 4 years on the gas tax, and he opposed that. I don't know exactly why, but anyway,
You
going
would
back,
have put a 4-year
four-year
limit
limit on it. Yes, and he opposed that. But with regard to the House, he did oppose it in the House. It went to the Senate. It came back in a conference committee, and he maintained his opposition to it at that point in time. And then it went to the governor's desk, and it came back with the governor vetoed the budget and amended the budget. And in the amendment, he specifically excluded the gas tax, the innovation tax. And as you know, to override a governor's veto, it's a 2/3 vote that's required. On that particular vote, he voted to oppose support the override.
Yeah.
And by supporting the override, that vote directly led to the imposition of that tax. So that's the record that I'm discussing when I represent his position on that. Now, some have claimed that that tax is a lesser of two evils, but there's an old joke my grandfather used to say about a guy at a wake that nobody liked, and the priest got up and said, "Hey, somebody's got to say something about him. Can somebody say something?" And one guy got up and he said, "Well, he was better than his brother." I mean, that's basically if you're offering the people in this district that this was the lesser of two evils as a choice. And a significant impediment to I think their economic condition. I don't think that's a satisfactory answer.
All right, so what would have you done? Because you might face similar votes where sometimes you got to hold your nose because say there was more aid money, local aid money in that overall budget for Westford, okay, but then there's an increase in the gas tax on the other side, and you have to decide, which I think that's what Jim's point is. He had to decide, what was going to be more beneficial for the constituency. So he's caught in the middle. Does he vote against the budget that is going to bring more aid into Westford, or does he, and also sink the gas tax, which basically the budget was going to be approved, but you're thinking, if you were sitting in his chair, okay, what would have you done?
Well, you got to make an assessment as to, in your opinion, right, what is going to be the impact, either negative or positive, on the largest number of your constituents, okay? And in my judgment, the gas tax, all right, even if the local aid had been held as a hostage, if you will, okay, the gas tax has such an impact on the economy with regards to our folks that commute back and forth to work, transportation. I talked with fellows who run a landscaping company. One guy is severely impacted by this tax. Another guy runs a small transportation company, and it impacts him as well. He has employees. So I would have to look at that and I say, okay, where we go? We can still fight that battle for local aid, but I'm not going to sacrifice the economic well-being of my constituents as well. So in my judgment, in that case, I would have opted for the not the indexing, okay, and I would continue the battle for the local aid increases. And the fact that I have to make that choice is indicative of the bad situation that we're in the district, okay? If I'm being held hostage over one or the other, then what I'm going to be working towards is to try to see if I can't change the ground game a little bit to make it more favorable to us so that we don't have to approach that kind of a situation.
So the gas tax should have been an individual vote and not tied in with the larger
That's
budget.
at very least
Yes.
I would have gone
And that's
along
what the Democratic leadership likes to do. They like to tie in
Love it.
everything so they get
So
people.
in this case, you would have not gone along with the override then?
I would have not gone along with the override and imposed that gas tax. No.
Now, the people who are behind question one, and one of them is Mike Widmer from Mass Taxpayers Association. I mean, he's not in favor of all taxes. Okay, he scrutinizes things, but he's made an argument, and we met with him. Decent guy. He's made an argument. Well, how are we going to fund these infrastructure improvements? Because the legislature does not have the will sometimes to take these tough tax votes, all right, when we got billions of dollars of infrastructure needs. On the other side of the coin, we said to him, well, they're just going to have to do it if they want to be in the legislature. Why tie it to indexing and punish the people with this when, you know, if they want to get 7 cents on that gas tax, they should do it and tell the people this is why we need 7 cents, as opposed to the 3% that was proved, and then just kick the can down the road on the CPI. Now, you acknowledge that we do need to upgrade the infrastructure in the state of Massachusetts.
Yes, I do.
So you'd be willing to take those tough individual votes, okay,
Right.
on the gas tax.
Right, but this is a common question that comes up every campaign about, well, you know, you've got to, will you be willing to make tough votes? The point that we need to also understand is that, and I go back to the increase in the state budget, is that there are significant issues, significant votes that need to be made, you know, and a step up to that. For example, right, we still support the Pacheco law, right, which prevents us from contracting out certain maintenance work and things like that. It makes it impossible in some cases to do contract work. We just imposed, and the incumbent voted to maintain the Pacheco law. He's voted he voted to impose collective bargaining on collective bargaining agreements on contractors that come in. We have an issue with project labor agreements that I think your paper has explained over the years very well, how they extend projects to increase prices. Okay, we have to go and take a real hard look at these kinds of these kinds of policies, and we have to reduce them. And I think we have to eliminate them, because what they're doing is the interests on Beacon Hill are willing to hold the taxpayer hostage with special interest benefits. And they're willing to hold infrastructure and other public safety, for example, services hostage so that they can get what they want. And that has got to end. That's the core problem in Massachusetts government right now. And that's what we need to attack. So, you know, many times a Republican is given the option, well, what are you going to do? The spending, you got to get this done. You can't forget that the focus is going to be going in there and reducing that special interest. And by doing that, in my judgment, I think that we will free up revenue that will allow us to pay for a lot of these things without having to increase the tax burden that we already have, and which is already significant.
Very good. Now, you got any more questions on taxes?
No.
No. Where do you stand on the casino gambling?
Good question. I'm in favor of repealing the current law. All right, and I'm repealing it because I would support maybe an individual casino in Massachusetts, but I believe that this was, I think it's a misguided effort by the House leadership during a very critical economic time to use the economic concerns to sell this package. All right, and it's weighted towards the industry, in my judgment. Some of the votes that were taken, which the incumbent himself took, I am very, very upset about. For example, there's no background investigations required for casino workers. They tried to put a gambler's bill of rights in, which would have limited how much you could lose in a day, and put clocks in, and they've allowed oxygen to be posted in. I mean, it's very heavily weighted towards the industry. And I think what we're finding from some of the data that's coming in from some of the other places that have this is that the refund or the revenue that's expected, in my judgment, is way overplayed. I don't think you're going to get as much as we think, because there's too much competition for them now. It's weighing it down. And one of the real concerns is if we now entice people to go into gaming and they leave the lottery, what happens to our local aid funds? You know, what happens to the whole local aid account? So this is a very misguided effort. I think it needs to be reviewed, rethought. Like I say, I would go along with maybe one casino or something to that effect.
So you're not personally opposed to gaming?
No. I just think that this package was bad.
Okay.
Really bad.
Say this is repealed, okay, and then the people of Springfield threaten to sue the state, okay, and going along with your line, that the legislature then does come up with one place, and it would be Springfield, okay, which it doesn't seem like anything is going to Springfield. And these people wanted it because of the economic situation they're in, where they have double-digit unemployment. And would you be in favor of just granting that license to Springfield? And I think the gubernatorial candidate for the Republicans, Charlie Baker, has said that.
Yeah, he has. He said that, and they have a compelling case. All right, they have a compelling case. I would like to look at it. I'd like to examine it and see. I want to make sure that they're going to get what they think they're going to get out of it, as opposed to adding to the problem. You're talking about casino workers. All right, you're talking about folks who are doing car dealers and things like that. All right, what is the salary that they're going to get, and what is the future that they're going to have, and is it? I mean, I believe Springfield has to be a targeted economic area. All right, I mean, top of my list. But do we want some kid at 17 years old right now who's trying to struggle his way up to look at a future as a blackjack dealer, or maybe as a welder or a machinist or something like that? That's what we need to offer them, But certainly, I'd be willing to listen to what the arguments are, and if it makes sense, I'd be willing to support it. But I wouldn't commit to that right off the bat on this. It's something I'd like to see as we develop. But
just switching gears here. You have a great, well, I think I can say that. That's not editorializing. Great law enforcement background, and you haven't brought this up in the campaign, but do you think the state is safe from your purview as far as terrorism, as far as health, safety, and welfare issues that have been, we had a plane that had to be evacuated and sanitized that came into Logan Airport with the latest scare for Ebola. But just going back to the Boston Marathon, the things that have supposedly been done since 9/11. With your background, do you think that the state is as safe as it should be or could be?
Well, let me just say this. Let me start off by saying that I've had the pleasure and honor to work with the law enforcement community for 30 years. I have the highest respect for members of the local law enforcement community as well as the Massachusetts State Police. I mean, my heart is always with them. And they are among the most courageous, dedicated law enforcement officers you're going to find, as you saw during that whole process over the bombing. My concern is that the strategic direction that is being applied from the governor's office on down raises concerns for me. All right, it raises concerns, and some of the concerns are and I'll take two examples. One of them is terrorism, and one of them is the recent heroin opioid epidemic. With regards to terrorism, the leadership in Massachusetts at this point is very, very comfortable with a reactive mode in regards to terrorism. I'm not. All right. I believe we have to have a proactive mode. I believe that there were certain indications that were available to us with regard to the Zainav brothers that should have tipped us off early on to the fact that there were concerns. The fact that they came on the screen after the bombing is the old-fashioned way of doing law enforcement, and it won't suffice in this time period. We're going to have to start bearing down and improving our domestic intelligence capabilities. Within the confines of the Constitution, absolutely. But we cannot have a situation where we shy away from trying to identify those people who are likely to cause us harm. We need to be able to, I believe, improve the quality of our law enforcement personnel. And I know you and I have had a little discussion about the Quinn Bill, and the Quinn Bill is gone by. But the fundamental thing that got lost in the Quinn Bill was the need to ensure an educated law enforcement community. How we do that, I'm open for it. Whether the Quinn Bill was the way to go is one thing, but it's absolutely imperative that we bring qualified, educated officers to this business to make sure that this keeps going. Now, on the other side, about the opioid controversy, and it gives a specific issue I think I can kind of identify for you, is that in order to deal with this heroin situation, the government has to provide a four-front approach. One has to be education, one has to be diversion response, one has to be hardcore drug enforcement, and the last is treatment. I'm not saying last by priority, I'm saying they have to be all equal and they have to come to bear at the same time. The component that we did lose over the last few years, we did lose some treatment capability. We certainly have lost a lot of the education because you don't see DARE people in the schools much anymore. We also lost the diversion component. Now, the diversion component was originally a task to the state police to go out and to essentially investigate reports from doctors, medical people, healthcare providers, when they recovered or discovered large amounts of narcotics missing, unauthorized missing. They would be investigated. There was a movement recently that imposed what is called prescription medication register that requires doctors to try to keep this register going so that they can track who's getting these the addictive drugs. Well, two things happen. Number one, the state police diversion unit has been scaled out, doesn't exist. It's been delegated to local communities. And the second thing is that the prescription register hasn't been mandated. It's only optional. And those are two things that you could do that we could do immediately to try to upscale and try to combat this epidemic of opioid addiction that we see going through Massachusetts. Then we have to get back into education, and we have to get back into treatment. There's no question, and it's part of it. But those are strategic decisions that law enforcement has to make at a state level from the governor's office in conjunction with education and in conjunction with Department of Public Health and everybody else. And I'd use Westford's registered marijuana dispensary bylaw as a good case in point. We were tasked with doing that in a very short period of time. Called together the Bill Olson, we called together Chief McEnany, we called together Zach Cataldo from Board of Health, Sandy Collins. Everybody came together, and we all worked on this together from those different various perspectives. And I think we hammered out a pretty good RMD bylaw in Westford that really allows the intent of the legislature to go forward, but also preserves the security and addresses the security concerns of the community of Westford. That's what we have to do across the board, all the way.
No one has applied for a license for Westford, though,
No.
have they? Okay, not yet.
Not yet.
Not good. All right. Well, Dennis, that was a quick 45 minutes. We covered a lot of ground. I want to give you this opportunity, 2 minutes, to tell the people why they should vote for you on November 4th.
Sure. I would like your vote on November 4th because we need leadership. We need leaders on Beacon Hill. We don't need followers. We need leadership that will vigorously press the needs and concerns of the 2nd Middlesex District, but at the same time is flexible enough to step outside the status quo, step across party lines, and try to build some new coalitions that can better address the serious problems that we're facing. I think I can help bring this about. As a former member of the state police, I have experience as an investigator and as a senior manager in a critical state agency. As a former director of security for the Executive Office of Transportation, I understand homeland security and transportation financing issues. As a former project manager for a global security provider, I have private sector experience. I have worked cooperatively with many of you on the Westford Planning Board to try to address problems facing our community. But my most cherished accomplishments are my marriage to my lovely wife, Kathy, for 37 years, raising my 4 children, and now being a grandfather to 2 lovely little girls. And I want to use my knowledge and experience to make Massachusetts a better place for them and for all kids, because that's what this is all about, the future. And that's why I'm asking for your vote on November 4th, 2014 for State Representative of the 2nd Middlesex District. Thank you very much. Thank you.